Hi, Sakal Shalom here, and thank you so much for joining me. And today's study is going to be about Purim. Purim and why we should remember it and the 2 days to celebrate it. So first, let me just say I am not a teacher. I am a student. I love studying scripture, and the Most High has just impressed on me to just share the studies that I've been doing. So the studies are to spur you on. Don't just believe what I say, but study it for yourself, test it and verify it for yourself. And maybe this will take you to wherever the Most High wants you to go and wants you to be. So let's get into the study. Oh, also, if you're new to the channel, then you know that sometimes I use different words for the things that we'll read in the Bible. So when we see the word God in scriptures, I'll probably say Elohim or Elua or Elohim. When you see Jesus, I will be saying Yehusha. When you see the Holy Spirit, I'll probably say the Ruach HaKodesh. So hopefully you can just stay with me and follow along. Okay, so let's get into the study of Purim. Okay, so the account of Purim is in the book of Esther. It is such an interesting and historical account. Okay, I'll give you the cliff notes basically. However, I encourage you to read it on your own because the entire book, I mean, if you have a good imagination and can just hear things and picture them while you're reading it, this would be one of those books. So let your imagination take you back in time. It is so exciting, and it is cultural and historical, okay, especially for our people. So let's go to Esther 1:1. Now it came to pass in the days of Ahasuerus. This is Ahasuerus, which reigned from India even into Ethiopia over 127 provinces, that in those days when King Ahasuerus sat on the throne of his kingdom, which was in Shushan, the palace. What's cool is that there are ruins of this place still around today. It's in Iran, this place called Susa. Esther 1:3. In the 3rd year of his reign, he made a feast unto all his princes and his servants, the power of Persia and Media, the nobles and princes of the provinces being before him. Let's go to Esther 1:9. Also Vashti the queen made a feast for the women in the royal house which belonged to King Ahasuerus. On the 7th day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, he commanded Mehuman, Biztha, Harbona, Bigtha, and Habaktha, Zethar, and Carcas, or Sarsus, the 7 chamberlains that served in the presence of Ahasuerus the king, to bring Vashti the queen before the king with the crown royal, to show the people and the princes her beauty, for she was fair to look upon. But the queen Vashti refused to come at the king's commandment by his chamberlains. Therefore was the king very wroth, and his anger burned in them. This was so disrespectful and embarrassing for the king, and it caused him great concern. It caused concern for the 7 princes because they feared that if this act was to go unpunished, their wives and the wives everywhere would use Queen Vashti as an example and start disrespecting their husbands too. So something had to be done. His buddies had a few suggestions. Let's go to Esther 1:19. If it please the king, let there go a royal commandment from him, and let it be written among all the laws of the Persians and the Medes, that it be not altered, that Vashti come no more before the king Ahasuerus, and let the king give her royal estate unto another that is better than she. As a matter of fact, his buddies were like, we're going to make this public. We're sending in a decree throughout the entire empire. And the king was like, okay, do it. After all that, King Ahasuerus' servants suggest that he search for a new queen. Esther 2:3. And let the king appoint officers in all the provinces of his kingdom, that they may gather together all the fair young virgins unto Shushan the palace, to the house of the women unto the custody of Hedge the king's chamberlain, keeper of the women, and let their things for purification be given them, and let the maiden which pleased the king be queen instead of Vashti. And the thing pleased the king, and he did so. Now in Shushan the palace there was a certain Yehudite, whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, a Benjamite. Now let's go to Esther 2:7. And he brought up Hadassah, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had neither father nor mother, and the maid was beautiful and agreeable. So Mordecai, when her father and mother were dead, took for his own daughter. So after the decree was out that King Ahasuerus was searching for a new queen, many young virgin women came to the palace for purification and to see if they would be chosen by the king. Now, King Ahasuerus quickly took notice of Hadassah and began to lavish her with gifts. She wasn't the only one, but was a chosen one. So, let's go to Esther 2:9. And the maiden pleased him, and she obtained kindness of him, and he speedily gave her things of purification, with such things as belonged to her, and 7 maidens, which were meant to be given her out of the king's house, and he preferred her and her maids unto the best place of the house of the women. Hadassah went to the king every time he would call for her. He would call for her by name. Everyone favored Hadassah. Mordecai, Hadassah's cousin, who was like her father, told her not to tell anyone that she was Yehudian. Hadassah kept that secret. King Ahasuerus favored her more than all the other women that had come. Let's go to Esther 2:17. And the king loved Esther above all the women, and she obtained grace and favor in his sight more than all the virgins, so that he set the royal crown upon her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. Then there was a feast to celebrate. Hadassah still hadn't told who she was or who her people were. For some reason, 2 of King Ahasuerus' friends disliked him and planned to kill him. What they didn't know while planning his murder was that Mordecai was sitting at the gate. He overheard them. Of course, he told Hadassah, and Hadassah told the king that it was Mordecai who found this information out. So the king inquired and found out that it was true. The 2 men were hanged until they were dead. So there was a servant in high rank and in service of the king. His name was Haman. He hated Mordecai, especially because Mordecai wouldn't bow down to him. When they asked and saw that he wouldn't comply, Mordecai then shared that he was a Yehudim, or Yehudi. Haman's anger grew. Because of this, Haman hated the Yehudim people and plotted to kill them all. Haman did this. Let's go to Esther 3:8. And Haman said unto King Ahasuerus, there is a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the people in all the provinces of thy kingdom, and their laws are diverse from all people, neither keep they the king's laws. Therefore it is not for the king's profit to suffer them. If it pleases the king, let it be written that they may be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver to the hands of those that have the charge of this business, to bring it into the king's treasuries. King Ahasuerus told Haman he can do whatever he pleased with the Yehudim. Haman sent out letters with the king's stamp on them to every province to kill the Yehudim and take spoil on the 13th day of the 12th month. Mordecai learned of this and was distraught. The Yehudim began to weep, fast, and pray. Hadassah got word of it and sent out a royal servant to find Mordecai so she can find out what was going on. He explained it all and related all to her servant and included that there was a bounty of money offered to those who killed the Yehudim. Mordecai then sent one of the letters back to Hadassah and asked that she go before the king with this matter. Hadassah was afraid because death was the penalty to go before the king without being summoned. The king could hold out his scepter and forgive the person, but you just never know. Mordecai told her to think of all the people. Perhaps this was the reason she was given this high position as queen, for this very moment. Hadassah decided to not let fear overtake her. She decided to step out on faith and do what was right. Let's go to Esther 4:6. Go gather together all the Yehudim that are present in Shushan, and fast ye for me, and neither eat nor drink 3 days, night or day. I also and my maidservants will fast likewise. And so will I go unto the king, which is not according to the law. And if I perish, I perish. And that's what they did. They fasted. Let's go to Esther 5:1. Now it came to pass on the 3rd day that Esther put on her royal apparel and stood in the inner court of the king's house over against the king's house. And the king sat upon his royal throne in his royal house over against the gate of the house. And it was so, when the king saw Esther the queen standing in the court, that she obtained favor in his sight. And the king held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. So Esther drew near and touched the top of the scepter. Then said the king unto her, What wilt thou, Queen Esther? And what is thy request? It shall be even given thee to half of the kingdom. And Esther answered, If it seem good unto you, the king, let the king and Haman come this day unto the banquet that I have prepared for him. They agreed to come. Haman was so full of pride that he told his family that he got a promotion and how Esther made him a banquet, and the banquet was just for him and the king. So that night, the king couldn't sleep and asked to be read the records according to the Chronicles to him. The part about Mordecai saving his life was read, and the king asked what, if anything, was done for Mordecai for what he did. The readers reported that nothing had been done. The king asked who was in the court at the time. They told him Haman was. The king asked that Haman come to him. Haman was there to ask the king if he could hang Mordecai. So the king asked Haman, what should be given to the man that the king delights in? Haman thought the king was talking about him. So he went all in, right? Let's read Esther 6:7. And Haman answered the king, For the man whom the king delights to honor, let the royal apparel be brought, which the king used to wear, and the horse that the king rides upon, and the crown royal which is set upon his head. And let this apparel and horse be delivered to the hand of the one of the king's most noble princes, that they may array the man with all whom the king delights to honor, and bring him on horseback through the street of the city, and proclaim before him, Thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor. The king said to Haman, Make haste, and take the apparel and the horse, as thou hast said, and do even so to Mordecai the Yehudi, and set it at the king's gate. Let nothing fail of all that thou hast spoken. Then took Haman the apparel and the horse, and arrayed Mordecai, and brought him on horseback through the street of the city, and proclaimed before him, Thus shall it be done unto the man whom the king delights to honor. Can you imagine the gut punch and embarrassment Haman must have felt? Pride really does come before the fall. Proverbs 16:18. This goes to confirm that what is written, that we ought not think highly of ourselves than we ought, in Romans 12:3, is true. Destruction comes to those who plan to do evil to Yah's people. Don't think you'll get away with it. Haman even went home and told his family what happened. Right after, the king sent for him to attend the banquet Hadassah prepared for him. At the banquet, the king asked Hadassah for her request and told her she could have up to half of his kingdom. Hadassah told him what Haman planned. That angered the king. Haman begged for his life. Haman was hanged on the very same gallows he made for Mordecai. Okay? Even if in one's heart ill intent for Yah's people, it will come back to you. Begging for your life just because you got caught means nothing. When Yehudim would have begged for their lives when Haman was out, making sure that they were being killed, would he have granted them life? We know the answer is no. Yah knew the answer was no. Not only did Haman die, but the king gave Hadassah Haman's house and gave Mordecai charge over it. After all this, Hadassah fell at the king's feet with one more request. The request was to reverse what was in the letters that Haman had sent out to all the provinces. The king granted that request. Not only was Haman hanged, but all 10 of his sons as well, because their father Haman hated and had ill intent for Yah's people. Just like it will happen in the future, those who have ill intent for Yah's people. So, why do we remember Purim? It isn't one of the 7 commanded feasts, and so why do we even remember it? Let's go to Esther 9:16. But the other Yehudim that were in the king's province gathered themselves together and stood for their lives and had rest from their enemies, and slew of their foes 75,000, but they laid not their hands on the prey. On the 13th day of the month of Adar, and on the 14th day of the same, rested they, and made it a day of feasting and gladness. Let's go to Esther 9:19. Therefore the Yehudim of the villages that dwelt in the unwalled towns made the 14th day of the month of Adar a day of gladness and feasting, and a good day, and of sending portions to one another. And Mordecai wrote these things and sent letters unto the Yehudim that were in all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus, both near and far, to establish this among them, that they should keep the 14th day of the month of Adar and the 15th day of the same yearly. Did you see that? You keep the 14th and the 15th of Adar to celebrate. As the days, verse 22, as the days wherein the Yehudim rested from their enemies, and the month which was turned into them from sorrow to joy, and from mourning into a good day, that they should make them days of feasting and joy, and of sending portions one to another and gifts to the poor. This is when we are free to give gifts to one another. If we're looking for an occasion to give gifts, let it be to Purim. We're to give gifts to one another and give to the poor. Not Christmas. We don't celebrate Christmas anyway, but that's not when we do it. And not necessarily Hanukkah. But at least here we know that it is our culture, and Yahuwah didn't get mad that we are able to give gifts to one another and to the poor. Now let's go to Esther 9:24. Because Haman the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of all the Yehudim, had devised against the Yehudim to destroy them, and had cast pur, that is, the lot, to consume them and destroy them. But when Esther came before the king, he commanded by letters that his wicked device, which he devised against Yehudim, should return upon his own head, and that he and his sons should be hanged in the gallows. Wherefore they called these days Purim, after the name Pur. Therefore all the words of this letter, and of that which they had seen concerning this matter, and which had come unto them, the Yehudim ordained, and took upon them and upon their seed, and upon all such as join themselves unto them, so as it should not fail, that they would keep these 2 days according to their writing and according to their appointed time every year. So when people ask you about why you celebrate Purim and how long to celebrate it, let them know that it is cultural. It is our history, and our ancestor Mordecai asked us to keep it for 2 days. And there is the proof that we just read. Okay, so the Feast of Purim is coming up soon. So I hope you enjoyed this study on Purim. Ahava Shalom, and see you next time. Oh, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Thank you so much. Toda Rabah. Shalom.